The movie is set in a dystopian 2034, where South Korea has been ravaged by a deadly flu. It is said that this virus is 10 times deadlier than COVID-19, resulting in hundreds and thousands of deaths. The condition is so severe that even birds are shot by the military, so that they don't transmit the disease to other countries. As a result of this flu, people die on the streets, cars crash into each other, and in short, the city has gone into chaos. When there is no place left to bury the dead bodies, the government piles them up like trash in a large stadium, and burns them at once. This is the peak of the flu. But to know how it began, let's go back to a few weeks earlier. It all started in Hong Kong, where a shipping container full of illegal immigrants is being readied for transport to Bundang, South Korea. As the in-charge inspects the people inside, someone suddenly starts coughing vigorously. Despite this, he gives the all-clear, and the container is dispatched on its journey. Elsewhere, in Bundang, a woman named Kim In-hae is involved in an accident, and now her car has fallen into a construction hole. In no time, the rescue squad arrives, but the car has been stuck in such a spot that only one person can go inside at a time. A guy named Kim Ji-koo takes the initiative and slowly makes his way down to Kim. The situation is so precarious that if they make too much movement, the car will plunge further down. Despite this, Ji-koo uses his experience and eventually rescues Kim. After the successful rescue operation, Ji-koo approaches Kim and tries to initiate a conversation, but the latter simply ignores him and leaves in the ambulance. That night, Kim calls Ji-koo and asks to meet at the same spot where the accident took place. Ji-koo is excited, believing that Kim has called him to appreciate his efforts. However, on reaching, he gets dejected to find out that she has simply called him to retrieve her bag from the hole. He initially refuses, claiming that it is against their protocols, but after Kim leaves, he enters the hole and retrieves the bag with the help of one of his colleagues. After this, he searches through the bag and finds an identity card, which shows that Kim is a doctor. Just then, the phone inside starts ringing, and Ji-koo answers it hesitantly. Kim's daughter, Miru, is on the other side, and after a small chat, Ji-koo agrees to meet her after school. Meanwhile, two brothers, Byung-ki and Byung-woo, approach the container with the illegal immigrants. When they open it, they are taken aback to find everyone dead, except one. There is also a very powerful stench inside the container. Confused about what to do, the brothers take videos of the scene and put the lone survivor inside their truck. After a while, they stop at a grocery store, and Byung-ki heads inside to get some supplies. Sensing the opportunity, the survivor makes a run for it. When Byung-ki returns from the store, he notices that the man has escaped, and that his brother is coughing profusely. He tries chasing the survivor, but ultimately gives up and instead takes his brother to a clinic. There, the doctor gives Byung-woo some normal prescriptions and asks him to rest, but Byung-woo cannot stop coughing. He spreads his droplets to all the people in his vicinity. Elsewhere, Ji-koo visits Miru outside her school and tries to start a conversation, but just like her mother, Miru refuses to interact. She simply takes her mother's bag and Ji-koo's business card before leaving. As Ji-koo is heading home, he notices some people coughing vigorously on the bus nearby. Following this, we are shown a montage of how the virus is slowly taking over the city of Bundang. Later, when Kim reaches home, she gets ecstatic to find that her bag has been returned. She hugs her daughter with joy and also thanks Ji-koo for his help. Just as the mom-daughter duo is bonding, Kim gets a call from her hospital, informing her that there has been a sudden emergency. Left with no options, she leaves Miru in the care of her grandmother. When Kim arrives at the hospital, she notices that everyone is scared. She immediately heads into the emergency room, where Byung-woo, the patient, is in a critical state. He has coughed up a lot of blood, and has red rashes on his body. Kim deduces that it is avian flu, and tells her seniors about it, but they are not convinced. Soon after, the doctors get a hold of Byung-woo's phone and find the footage of the container filled with dead bodies. They are sure that the virus originated from there, and approach the patient's brother, Byung-ki, to ask about it, but he remains silent. Suddenly, an emergency alarm starts blaring, and this makes Byung-ki anxious. Despite the doctor's warning, he wrestles everyone and rushes into the emergency room, only to find that his brother has passed away. Devastated, he breaks down and hugs his brother, causing his hands to get stained with blood. Byung-ki then touches several of the doctors with his hands, but after a long struggle, he is finally subdued. In the next scene, Miru gets bored and ventures out of her house alone. She is almost hit by a vehicle, but Mansai, the survivor from the container, saves her. Miru notices that he is hungry, and provides him with some food. As they talk, Mansai warns the little girl to stay away from him since he is sick, but Miru continues talking to him. A while later, Mansai starts coughing, prompting Miru to get some aid. She calls Ji-koo for help, but by the time he arrives, Mansai is already gone. By this time, thousands of people in the city have become infected by the virus, resulting in the hospitals becoming overcrowded with patients. On the other hand, Kim, along with a team of the KCDC, Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, locate the container and incinerate all the dead bodies inside. However, a large swarm of rats, which had been feeding on the corpses, manages to escape into the city. Meanwhile, a medical team consisting of top doctors from around the country hold an emergency meeting. After a heated conversation, the team concludes that the deadly virus is a modified version of the H5N1 strain, which can kill its victims within 36 hours. They also instruct the higher officials to quarantine the city, or else it may spread to the whole country, and even the world. Elsewhere, Jiku has taken Miru to a supermarket. There, they have lunch and start bonding, while sharing some of their secrets with each other. After a while, as they prepare to leave, chaos begins to unfold. People start coughing up blood and fall unconscious. Some of them even die on the spot. Jiku notices a woman about to fall from the escalator, and saves her, but in the process, he loses sight of Miru. Back at the emergency meeting, the doctors and politicians get into an argument, as some of them deem the quarantine unnecessary. During this time, a series of accidents occur outside, resulting in mass casualties. Now, the virus is spreading at such a rapid rate that the hospitals and communication systems have become overwhelmed, and the quarantine is forcefully initiated. Fearing for their lives, the politicians and doctors decide to fly to Seoul and continue their research there. As the researchers plan to evacuate the city, Dr. Kim informs her colleagues that she will join them later, after she finds her daughter. She calls Miru, but Jiku picks up and briefs her about the situation in the supermarket. Wasting no time, she reaches the place, but gets devastated to find that her daughter is missing. Soon, the situation gets out of control when people start looting the stores and fighting against each other. As a result, the army is deployed and a huge brawl ensues. Kim and Jiku search for the little girl amidst the chaos and after a while, finally find her. The three then get out of the supermarket, just before the shutter is closed. Once they are out of danger, Kim requests Jiku to leave the city along with them, but he refuses, claiming that it is his duty to help the people. He then hands Kim his car keys and sends them away. After a while, he teams up with one of his colleagues and releases the people trapped inside the supermarket. Meanwhile, Kim and her daughter reach the airport and pass the security checks. But just as they are about to head towards the final chopper to Seoul, Miru starts coughing, and as a result, they are denied entry. That night, the Korean Army along with the US forces and the KCDC reinforce a strict lockdown throughout the city. All the residents are relocated to a quarantine camp. At an emergency meeting in Seoul, the politicians team up with national and international physicians, and come to a conclusion that the citizens will be tested, and then segregated as infected or uninfected. One of the physicians claims that mixing the two sets of people will result in an even bigger spread of the virus, but the others tell him to remain silent. Their plan is to release the ones who don't show any symptoms, while the infected will be treated in a separate ward. Meanwhile at the camp, Kim arrives with her daughter and notices the dilapidated state of the place. People barely have space to move, let alone live. Some of them are already coughing up blood, while others live in constant fear that they will be infected soon. Later, while Kim is tying her daughter's hair, she notices red rashes on her neck. Despite this, she takes Miru through the examination room and into the quarantine camp. The next morning, on the government's orders, some soldiers gather on rooftops and shoot at the birds, fearing that they will transmit the virus to other places. Down in the camp, Monsai is finally discovered by the authorities. After examining him, the doctors are taken aback to find out that he has somehow overcome the virus and developed an immunity. They then call Kim to start working on an antibody, as she is the only doctor in the camp who knows about the virus. A few hours later, Kim is successful in extracting the antibody from him. However, when she presents the idea of injecting the antibodies directly into a patient, her seniors reject it. Later that day, while Kim is trying to smuggle her sick daughter out of the place, a couple of quarantine staff arrive there, trying to locate Miru, using her tag number 2066. They mentioned that her results came out positive, so they are there to take her. Kim is devastated that she is going to be separated from her daughter, but just then, Jiku steps forward and introduces himself as number 2066. With this, the guards take him away to the infected zone. Later, one of his friends spots him, and cleverly uses his own card to take Jiku out. Elsewhere, Kim enters the special tent where Monsai is being held. Even though the higher authorities instructed her against injecting the antibodies directly, she proceeds to use it on Miru, who has now become extremely sick. Kim starts a transfusion between her daughter and Monsai, but a few moments later, the troops notice her and barge inside. They then put her to sleep and take the infected Miru away. In the next scene, Jiku witnesses guards transporting a child's body into the contaminated zone and assumes it is Miru's. He pursues the men and discovers Miru's headband along the way. Soon after, he reaches a place where thousands of infected corpses are being wrapped up in plastic. Some of them aren't even dead yet. As Jiku continues searching for Miru, he comes across a horrific sight. A large crane is grabbing a pile of dead bodies and dumping them into a stadium, which has now become an incineration pit. Fearing the worst, he immediately heads down to the pit and starts looking for the girl. As a large flame burns the bodies, Jiku suddenly hears a ringtone and realizes that it belongs to Miru. He rushes to the location and finally discovers the little girl wrapped in plastic, still alive. Meanwhile, the tension inside the quarantine camp has reached a boiling point. When an officer fatally shoots an infected soldier, the crowd goes wild and erupts out of the camp. On their way out, they notice Jiku saving Miru from the burning pile of corpses and deduce that the infected are being incinerated alive. Because of the public outburst, the medical personnel decide to leave the place and continue their research on Monsai elsewhere. They ask Kim to accompany them, but she refuses, claiming that she has to find her daughter. As they are heading out, Byungki notices Monsai and fatally stabs him as vengeance for the loss of his brother. At the same time, Kim desperately searches for her daughter around the camp, but fails to find her. As a result, she reluctantly leaves with the medical staff. Back in Seoul, the president witnesses the city of Bundang in a state of utter pandemonium. He is under constant pressure by a member of the UN, Schneider, to eliminate the infected, so that they don't cross the border. Despite this, he orders the army to stand down until an antibody is made. Schneider and the vice president aren't happy with the decision, but they decide to wait for the antibody. Unfortunately, things take a turn for the worse when Monsai dies in the ambulance, and with this, their hopes of developing an antibody also dies. When the vice president learns of this, he secretly instructs the army to stop the outraged civilians from entering the Seoul border. While several civilians are killed in the shootout, Jiku somehow escapes the place with Miru, who, by this time, has started to feel better. She is even able to speak, implying that the antibody worked on her. Elsewhere, Kim rushes to meet her daughter, but she is stopped by the armed soldiers. She repeatedly mentions that her daughter has the cure, so one of the soldiers takes her to their base to communicate with the president. Back on the streets, a man overhears Jiku saying Miru has the antibody, so he goes after them. When the girl is alone, he takes her to an isolated room and tries to extract her blood. Fortunately, Jiku arrives with his friend, and the three engage in a brutal fight. At last, Jiku manages to kill the man, but his best friend is severely injured in the fight. In the meantime, Kim talks with the president and informs him that her daughter has totally been cured of the virus, and may have the antibody to it. Hearing this, the president orders his soldiers to hold their fire, but Schneider isn't convinced, and he tells them to keep shooting. After a while, Kim reaches the border, and when she sees Miru among the infected, she runs towards her. Unfortunately, as she tries to take her daughter over the containment line, she is shot, as per the orders of Schneider. But before the soldiers can do further damage, Miru shields her mom, and repeatedly tells the men to not shoot. This warms the hearts of everyone, including the soldiers, and they stand back. Even the infected people get renewed motivation and they start running towards the border. On the other hand, when Schneider sees the soldiers refrain from shooting, he calls an airstrike. This enrages the president, and he orders his men to shoot the fighter planes if they enter Bundang. As a result, the two get into a heated confrontation, but at last, Schneider backs down. After the danger is averted, the president goes live and announces to everyone that he will find a cure, and do whatever it takes to save his people. In the last scene, Miru is sent to Seoul to create a vaccine, while Kim and Jiku stay behind. The movie ends as a reporter announces that the vaccine has become successful, and the people of Bundang will be the first ones to receive it.